The ballroom was full of people, pretending to care about children's hospitals, while secretly calculating how much camera time they'd get for their donations. I was standing near the bar, nursing a whiskey I didn't want, when I saw her sitting alone in the corner. The CEO's daughter. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone also knew why she was sitting alone. The scars ran down the left side of her face, from her temple to her jaw, not fresh, old enough that they'd healed into permanent ridges that caught the chandelier, light at angles that made people uncomfortable. I'd heard the whispers when she'd arrived, heard the carefully constructed sympathy that was really just thinly veiled, relief that their own daughters looked normal. Heard one woman say to another, "It's so brave of Richard to bring her out in public." Poor thing. She must know everyone's staring. Her name was Caroline Hartwell, 26 years old, daughter of Richard Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, the third largest pharmaceutical company in North America. The accident had happened when she was 19, a car crash that killed her best friend and left Caroline with scars that no amount of her father's money could completely erase. I watched her sit there in a silver dress that probably cost more than most people's cars, holding a champagne glass she wasn't drinking from, looking at the crowd like she was studying a species she no longer belonged to. Her right hand kept touching her face, not covering it, just touching it, like she was reminding herself it was still there, that she was still here. The band started playing something slow. Couples drifted onto the dance floor. I saw at least 3 men glance at Caroline, calculate whether asking her to dance would score them points with her father, then decide the social awkwardness wasn't worth the potential business connection. I set down my whiskey and walked toward her. "My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 32 years old. I run a nonprofit that builds accessible playgrounds for kids with disabilities. I was at this charity gala because one of our major donors had bought me a ticket and insisted I network. I hate networking. Hate these events where everyone's kindness has a price tag attached. But I'd learned to smile and shake hands and pretend. I belonged in rooms full of people who'd never spent a day worrying about rent. Caroline saw me coming. Her posture changed, straightened, like she was preparing for impact, preparing for whatever condescending kindness I was about to offer. I stopped in front of her table. "Would you like to dance?" She blinked, looked around like I might be talking to someone else. "Excuse me? Would you like to dance? The band's good. The floor's not too crowded yet, and you look like you'd rather be anywhere but sitting alone while everyone pretends not to stare." Her expression did something complicated. Suspicion mixed with surprise mixed, with the careful wariness of someone who'd been pitied too many times to trust. Genuine kindness. "Did my father put you up to this?" "I've never met your father. Don't particularly want to. I'm asking because I'd like to dance with you, not because of who your father is. Because you're the only person in this room who looks as miserable as I feel, and misery loves company." She almost smiled. Almost. That's not a very romantic pitch. I'm not trying to be romantic. I'm trying to be honest. So, dance? Caroline set down her champagne glass, stood slowly. She was taller than I'd expected. Nearly my height and heels. When she moved, there was grace underneath the caution, like she'd been a dancer once and her body remembered even if her confidence didn't. We walked to the dance floor and I put one hand on her waist and took her other hand in mine. The music was something classical, soft, the kind of thing rich people think is classy. Up close, I could see her scars more clearly, could see the way they pulled slightly at her skin when she moved, could see the faint white lines where surgeons had tried to minimize the damage. "You're staring," she said quietly. "I am sorry. I was just thinking that whoever did your reconstructive work did an incredible job. The scarring pattern suggests at least 3 separate procedures. They managed to preserve your facial mobility almost completely. That's exceptional surgical skill." She went very still. "How do you know that?" "I spent 2 years in medical school before I realized I was more interested in prevention than treatment. Switched to public health, but I still remember enough about reconstructive surgery to recognize quality work when I see it. Most people see my scars and look away, pretend they're not there. You're the first person in years who's actually looked at them and said something other than 'I'm sorry.' Why would I be sorry? You survived something. These scars are proof you're stronger than whatever tried to break you. That's not something to apologize for. That's something to respect. We moved across the floor, and I could feel tension leaving her body. Her hand in mine was cold at first, then gradually warmed. She was a good dancer. Better than me. I kept stepping on the rhythm, and she adjusted without comment. Just followed my lead even when my lead was wrong. "What's your name?" she asked. Daniel Cross. The playground guy. I've read about you. You built that inclusive playground in Chicago last year. The one with the wheelchair-accessible equipment and sensory-friendly spaces. That's me. How did you know about that? I know about a lot of things. People assume that because I don't go out much, I don't pay attention. But I research. I look for people who are actually making a difference instead of just writing checks to feel good about themselves. She paused. Why playgrounds? Because every kid deserves to play, regardless of ability, regardless of disability. Play is how children learn, how they develop, how they connect with other kids. And for too long, we've built playgrounds that only work for able-bodied children. I wanted to change that. That's a good answer. It's the true answer. The song ended. Another one started. We kept dancing. I saw people watching us now, saw the whispers starting, saw Richard Hartwell himself standing near the stage, watching his daughter dance with a stranger. His expression was unreadable. Not angry. Not pleased. Just watchful. "My father's going to have you investigated by morning," Caroline said, following my gaze. "He does that with anyone who gets close to me. Make sure they're not after money or trying to use me to get to him. Let him investigate. He'll find student loan debt, a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that's gentrifying but hasn't gotten there yet, and a nonprofit that operates on a shoestring budget and prayers. Not exactly gold digger material. You'd be surprised how many men have tried anyway. Figured proximity to me was worth the social awkwardness if it meant access to my father's network. I don't want access to your father's network. I want to dance with you because you're interesting and honest, and the first person at this entire event who hasn't tried to sell me something or convince me to sell them something." She looked at me directly then. Really looked. Her eyes were gray, sharp. The kind of eyes that had spent years watching people from the sidelines and learning to read what they didn't say. "Why are you really here, Daniel? At this gala? You don't belong in this world. You look uncomfortable in that tux. You've been standing by the bar all night avoiding conversation. So why come? Donor obligation. Woman who funds 30% of my operating budget bought me a ticket and told me to make connections. I'm bad at making connections. Good at building things. Bad at selling myself. I'm good at reading people. Bad at trusting them. We're quite a pair." The second song ended. I should have thanked her and walked away. Should have let this be a nice moment and nothing more. But I didn't. "Would you like to get some air? The balcony's probably empty and I could use a break from this room." Caroline hesitated. I could see her calculating. Weighing trust against risk. Finally, she nodded. "Yes, but if this is some elaborate setup to humiliate me, I want you to know my father has very expensive lawyers." Noted. We walked through the crowd toward the balcony doors. People parted, stared. I felt Caroline's hand tighten on my arm, felt her preparing for the comments, the looks, the careful cruelty of people who'd never learned that scars are just skin with history. The balcony was empty. Cold November air hit us and Caroline shivered. I took off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders without asking. She pulled it tighter, looking out at the city lights, spreading below us like a galaxy made of glass and ambition. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "For the jacket? It's just for dancing with me, for looking at my scars instead of avoiding them, for treating me like a person instead of Richard Hartwell's damaged daughter, for not asking what happened. Everyone always asks what happened, like my trauma is public property just because my face makes it visible. Your trauma is yours. You don't owe anyone the story of how you got your scars, just like I don't owe anyone the story of how I got mine." She turned to look at me. "You have scars?" I pulled up my left sleeve, showed her the burn marks running up my forearm. Old, faded to white against my skin. House fire. I was 8. My little sister was trapped in her room. I got her out, but the doorframe collapsed. Burning wood. I spent 6 months in physical therapy relearning how to use my hand properly. Caroline reached out slowly, touched the scars with gentle fingers. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore." Sometimes when the weather changes, the skin pulls. But mostly it's just there, part of my story. Proof that I survived. Proof that love is stronger than pain. Your sister? She's a doctor now. Pediatric oncologist. Saves kids every day. I like to think pulling her out of that fire was the best thing I ever did. Even if it left marks. Caroline was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. The accident that gave me these scars killed my best friend, Emma. We were 19. Driving back from spring break. I was driving. A truck crossed the median. I swerved. We hit a tree. The windshield shattered. Emma died on impact. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital with half my face held together by stitches and the knowledge that she was gone because I wasn't fast enough, wasn't good enough. Couldn't save her? You survived. That's not your fault. Everyone says that. My therapist, my father, the lawyers who handled the lawsuit. But I was driving. I was responsible. And now I have to live with these scars. While Emma is buried in a cemetery in Connecticut and her parents won't return my calls because looking at me reminds them of what they lost. I turned to face her fully. Caroline, listen to me. Survivor's guilt is real. It's powerful. It'll eat you alive if you let it. But you can't spend your life punishing yourself for being alive. Emma wouldn't want that. I never knew her, but I know that people who love us don't want us to suffer for surviving when they didn't. They want us to live. Actually live, not just exist in the margins while the world moves on. How do you do that? How do you live with scars that everyone can see? How do you let people look at you and not feel like you're constantly being judged? By remembering that my scars tell a story about love, about sacrifice, about the moment I chose my sister over my own safety. Your scars tell a story too, about surviving, about enduring, about being strong enough to keep going even when part of you died in that car. Those aren't marks of shame, they're marks of courage. And anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time. She was crying now, silent tears running down her scarred cheek. I reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped them gently with my thumb. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be angry that this happened to you. But you're not allowed to believe that you're less valuable because your face changed. You're not allowed to hide from the world because people are small-minded and cruel. You're Caroline Hartwell. You're brilliant and beautiful and stronger than any of these people in that ballroom. Don't let them make you forget that. She grabbed my hand, held it against her face. I won't forget you, Daniel Cross. I won't forget that you saw me, really saw me. Not my father's daughter, not the girl with scars. Just me, Caroline. I won't forget that. The balcony door opened. Richard Hartwell stepped out. He was 60, gray-haired, powerful in the way wealthy men are powerful. His eyes went from his daughter to me to our joined hands. Caroline, it's time to go. Dad, this is Daniel. He runs a non-profit that builds accessible playgrounds. We were just talking. I know who he is. I had someone look him up while you were dancing. Mr. Cross, my daughter needs to leave now. Caroline, say goodbye. Caroline looked at me, then at her father. I could see the old pattern settling over her. The obedience, the retreat, the return to being Richard Hartwell's protected, damaged daughter instead of Caroline, the woman who'd just shared her truth with a stranger on a balcony. But then something shifted in her expression. No. Richard's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? I said, no, Dad, I'm not ready to leave. Daniel and I were having a conversation, a real conversation. The first one I've had with anyone outside of therapists and you in months. And I'm not ready for it to be over just because you decided it's time to go. Caroline? I'm 26 years old. I'm not a child. I'm not fragile. I'm not something you need to protect from the world. I survived a car crash that should have killed me. I can survive a conversation with a kind man who treats me like a person. So either you can wait inside until I'm ready to leave, or you can go home without me and I'll find my own way. But I'm not leaving. Not yet. The silence that followed was heavy. I could see Richard Hartwell recalculating, reassessing, looking at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time in years. Finally, he nodded. 1 hour. Then we're leaving. Mr. Cross, I trust you'll behave appropriately. Always do, sir. Richard left. Caroline let out a breath she'd been holding. I've never done that before. Never stood up to him. Never told him no. How does it feel? Terrifying, exhilarating, like I just remembered I have a voice. We stayed on that balcony for 53 minutes. Talked about everything. Her childhood before the accident. My work. Her abandoned dreams of becoming a photographer. My failed relationships. The way loneliness changes shape, depending on whether you're alone by choice or by circumstance. We talked like people who'd been waiting years to be honest with someone and finally found someone who could handle the truth. When her father came back, Caroline stood, handed me back my jacket. Thank you, Daniel, for tonight, for seeing me, for reminding me that I'm more than what happened to me. You're welcome. And Caroline, you're not just more than what happened to you. You're someone worth knowing, someone worth spending time with, someone I'd very much like to see again if you're interested. She smiled. Full, real, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with scars or their absence. I'm interested. Very interested. But I need you to understand something. I come with complications. A father who will investigate anyone in my life. Trauma that doesn't just disappear because someone is kind. Scars that will never go away. If you're looking for easy, I'm not it. I don't want easy. I want real. And you're the most real person I've met in years. Caroline pulled out her phone. Give me your number. I'll text you tomorrow. We can get coffee. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can talk without an audience. I gave her my number. She typed it in. Then she did something unexpected. She stood on her toes and kissed my cheek, right on the scarred side. I meant what I said. I won't forget you. She left with her father. I stood on that balcony for another 20 minutes, processing what had just happened. I'd come to this gala expecting to hate every minute, expected to make polite conversation and leave early and forget the whole thing by morning. Instead, I'd met someone extraordinary, someone real, someone who understood that survival leaves marks and marks tell. Stories and stories are what make us human. 3 days later, we met for coffee, then dinner, then a walk through the park where I was building a new playground. She brought her camera, started photographing the construction, the workers, the children who waited every day at the fence to see the progress. She had an eye for moments, for capturing emotion in the angle of a shoulder or the way light fell across a half-built slide. Within 2 months, she was documenting all my projects, building a portfolio that told the story of accessible, play in a way words never could. Her photographs appeared in grant, applications and donor presentations, and eventually in a gallery show that raised $100,000 for the nonprofit. Within 6 months, she'd moved out of her father's house, got her own apartment, started living instead of hiding, started remembering who she'd been before, the accident and becoming who she was meant to be after it. Richard Hartwell didn't make it easy, investigated me thoroughly, tried to pay me to leave his daughter alone. When that didn't work, tried to threaten me with lawyers and influence, and all the weapons wealthy men use when they can't control the people they love. But Caroline stood firm, told him she was choosing her own life, her own relationships, her own future, that he could be part of it or not, but he couldn't control it anymore. Eventually, he backed down. He even came to respect me, I think. Donated to the nonprofit. Showed up to ribbon cuttings. Watched his daughter transform. From a woman hiding from the world to a woman changing it. One photograph at a time. A year after that charity gala, I asked Caroline to marry me. Not in some grand gesture. Just sitting on a completed playground at sunset. Watching kids play on equipment that worked for everyone. Kids in wheelchairs racing kids on foot. Kids with sensory issues finding peace in the quiet corners we'd built specifically for them. Kids being kids, together, the way it should be. Marry me, I said. Not because you're Richard Hartwell's daughter, not despite your scars, but because you're Caroline. Because you're brilliant and strong and the person I want to build the rest of my life with. Because loving you has taught me that scars are just proof we survived, and survival is worth celebrating. She said yes. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. Close friends. Her father walked her down the aisle and actually smiled. Genuine. Proud. The smile of a man who'd learned to let go and discovered his daughter was stronger than he'd ever given her credit for. At our reception, the band played the same song we danced to that first night. We moved across the floor, and Caroline looked at me with eyes full of love and joy and the kind of peace that comes from being fully known and fully accepted. I told you I wouldn't forget you, she said. You did. Best promise anyone's ever made me. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else was looking away. Thank you for treating my scars like they were part of my story instead of the whole story. Thank you for loving the woman I am instead of mourning the woman I might have been. Thank you for being brave enough to let me in, for choosing to live instead of hide, for showing me that beauty has nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with truth. Here's what I learned from dancing with the CEO's scarred daughter. Society teaches us that value is measured in appearances, that worth is determined by how closely we match some impossible standard of perfection, that scars, whether physical or emotional, are things to hide, things to be ashamed of, things that make us less. But scars are proof we survived something that tried to break us, proof we're stronger than our worst moments, proof that we endured. And anyone who can't see past the surface to the strength underneath isn't worth your time. Caroline had spent years believing her scars made her unlovable, believing that the accident had stolen not just her friend, but her future, her possibility, her worth. She'd hidden from a world that was too small-minded to see past her face to her heart. But she wasn't the problem. The world was, and the moment she stopped, accepting the world's judgment and started trusting her own worth, everything changed. She stopped hiding, started living, started creating, started building a life that mattered not because it looked perfect, but because it was real. I didn't save Caroline. She saved herself. I just reminded her she was worth saving, just saw her when she was ready to be seen, just loved her when she was ready to be loved. That's all any of us can do for each other. See the truth, speak the truth, love the truth, even when the truth comes with scars. If you believe that real beauty lives in strength, that scars tell stories worth hearing, that love sees past the surface to the soul underneath, then stay with Real Veil Studios, because some stories aren't just told, they're lived. And this one started with a dance and became a lifetime. Real Veil Studios.